All right, we have a lot to do today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. But please feel free to continue introducing yourself as I go through the introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joined this call. Welcome. We are really excited to get started and share this new Pause and Reflect resource with you guys. It was created especially with the emergency food security community in mind. But before we start, we'd like to inform you that this session will be recorded and that we are providing interpretation in French. So please go ahead and select your preferred language. You can do so by clicking the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It looks like a globe, and selecting either English or French. You can choose to mute the original audio or listen to it at a lower volume, but it is important that everyone selects a language. So please either choose English or French. Also today, we're using a kind of a fun technology for presentation called AHA slides. The AHA slides allows the audience to react to and interact with presenters. So we'll be sharing the slideshow here in Zoom for all of you to see, but we would like you to join us. We'd like to invite you to join us on the AHA slides by following the link that my colleague has dropped in the chat. Or if you'd like to follow along with your phone, you can take a picture of the QR code that's right there on the screen. And that will take you also to the AHA slides. So when you're following along in AHA slides, you'll be able to participate in some polls. And also there'll be a Q&A session today, so you can ask your questions through the AHA slides. Also, you'll see ask a question on every slide. So you're welcome to pop your questions in there on the ask a question at any time during the presentation if you're in the AHA slides. If you have any technical issues today, please chat someone with tech in their Zoom name and they will help you. So with the housekeeping out of the way, let's look at what we're going to be covering today. So we're in the introductions part here. I'll just introduce the toolkit briefly and our presenters for today. We will cover an overview of the Food for Thought Pause Reflection Toolkit and also hear some experiences from a pilot in Indonesia. Then there'll be an interactive session toward the end with the audience where we can do some Q&A. And then we'll look at, we'll close out with just looking at how Mercy Corps is rolling out this toolkit and with a brief survey. So that's our agenda for the day. Just as a brief introduction, the Food for Thought Pause and Reflect Toolkit for emergency food security activities was created by Mercy Corps with funds from Ideal's Small Grant Program. The Small Grant Program offers USAID BHA implementing partners an opportunity to design, pilot, test, and share food security and nutrition promising practices, resources, and systems. The awards empower IPs to fund and grow ideas that benefit the entire food and nutrition security community. To date, Ideal has funded 28 awards which support a number of different activities such as testing new approaches, strengthening knowledge management systems, supporting applied research, and developing new tools and practitioner-focused guides and resources such as this one that we're introducing today. Ideal also provides grantees with unique opportunities to disseminate and share their products and learning beyond the context of the award. So as many implementing partners as possible can begin to utilize the products and apply learnings in their work. This toolkit took about 1.5 years to develop and included a comprehensive desk review, write-up of the toolkit, pilots, and finalization. It's an interactive PDF, which means it has a more dynamic look and feel. So instead of the classic PDF where a user scrolls up and down a long series of pages, this file is easy to navigate and feels a little bit like a website. In February 2022, the toolkit was fully piloted in Indonesia with the Mercy Corps Managing Risk Through Economic Development Program, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But today, I want to introduce our representatives from Mercy Corps who are here to introduce the toolkit and share their experiences using it. We have Piva Bell, who is the Program Performance Quality and Indonesia Response Team Manager for Mercy Corps Indonesia. And she was the facilitator of the toolkit pilot in Indonesia. We have Mary Gorkmazian, who is the Senior Director for MEL at Mercy Corps Global. And Mary was really the driving force behind the development and the piloting of the toolkit. And then last but not least, we have Conrad Murindo, who is a program learning advisor with Mercy Corps, and he'll be walking us through an introduction of the Food for Thought PNR toolkit. But before we hand over to Conrad to introduce the toolkit, we'd like to hear from you guys out in the audience, and we want to do a quick interactive poll to learn a bit about you guys and your experiences with Pause and Reflect. So if you haven't yet, please join the AHA slides either through the link in the chat or through the QR code on your screen. And then once you get into the AHA slides, you should be able to answer the first poll question, which is, have you ever participated in a Pause and Reflect before? Looks like we have a lot of people who have, a few people who are like, what's a Pause and Reflect? So you're in the right place because you're going to learn a little bit more about Pause and Reflect today. So we have about 60% yes, 30% no, and a few people who are ready to learn a little bit more about Pause and Reflect. Let's go to the next question. So if you have done a Pause and Reflect, maybe you could share with us, what did you find most valuable about the Pause and Reflect? Give people a second to answer. Gathering in person as a team. A couple people don't know what was valuable for them. Looking at data together. Time to think, just making the time to think and reflect. Identifying what we could improve upon collectively. I hear a lot of that interaction is really important, and that dedicated time to think. Resources for change, review of the theory of change, remembering our goals, reflecting on our goals, reflecting on activities, and just hearing a variety of perspectives and different perspectives. All these are really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. It can be very messy too. I like that one. Provides a space for a little bit of messiness and reflection. Wonderful, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Conrad. And he's going to introduce the Food for Thought Pause and Reflect Toolkit with us. Conrad, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Jenny, for that overview and the introduction. So a reminder to our participants, welcome. And at the end of this session, my colleague Matthias and Mary are going to help you navigate the toolkit. So please, this is an incentive for you to stay tuned throughout this session. The Food for Thought Pause and Reflect Toolkit follows or builds on the USAID collaboration, learning and adaptive framework, which is a set of practices meant to improve programming outcomes. And it is very important for programs to take time to critically pause, think critically about the ongoing activities, and also then processes and plan the best way forward. So this is very important. The next slide, Jenny. Yes, Jenny has given you the overview of how this toolkit was developed and the peer review processes that went through. One important aspect to mention here is the resources that you are going to find in this toolkit are adaptable and modifiable. They are available in Word format, so you feel free to edit them into your program or country or context so that you can efficiently use them. Next slide. So the toolkit contains a step-to-step guide on how to conduct a Pause and Reflect session. there are practical tools, and these practical tools are in 3 phases. There's the preparation phase, the implementation phase, and the follow-through phase, and the facilitator's guide. This is one of the important piece of the toolkit, which gives guides the facilitator, whether it's in-house or an externally contracted facilitator, to plan, implement, and then facilitate and organize Pause and Reflect Toolkit. Usually this is done over a 1-day period, but for starters, maybe even if the Pause and Reflect session can be done over 1.5 days or 2 days. Next slide, Jenny. Yes, so the Pause and Reflect session is meant to complement other monitoring and learning activities, and the frequency or the timing of the Pause and Reflect session depend on the complexity of the program. For multi-year programs, multi-sectorial programs, ideally we recommend this to be done annually with light touch Pause and Reflect session along the way, maybe biannually and even quarterly, resources permitting. For single-year programs, those that run 9 to 12 months, this should be ideally done near the end of the program. And for those that are less than a year, we recommend an after-action review for programs to then use evidence-based programming, learn from the different sources, and use that for adaptive management. Next slide, Jenny. Right. So in this phase, I'm going to give you an overview of what is contained in the Pause and Reflect Toolkit. There are 3 phases of the practical tools that are contained in the Pause and Reflect Toolkit, those that enable you to prepare well, then followed by the implementation, and then the follow-through. In terms of the preparation, this will help you to develop the agenda, develop the priority learning question, and in the tool you are going to find the learning question matrix, which is one resource that is helpful for you to prioritize, brainstorm together with the team on which are the priority learning questions that are going to determine the quality of the Pause and Reflect session. And also then there are resources that will help you develop the agenda. And as you develop the agenda and the learning questions, you also need to, because this is an evidence-based session, you need to gather and prepare a lot of data sources from multiple sources. For example, from your post distribution monitoring, your indicator tracking table, and also how are you going to present the data. This needs to be done prior to the implementation, and also how then you assemble. You then invite your attendees. It's not everyone who is going to attend the Pause and Reflect session. You need then to identify, based on the core learning priorities, with the valuable expertise who is going to attend and to add value to the Pause and Reflect session. The next phase is during the implementation of the Pause and Reflect session. We have included in the toolkit various resources, even how you set up the workshop for the Pause and Reflect session, when you start, how do you do the collaboration learning and adaptation temperature check, usually using various USAID, CLA materials. And also one resource that I will detail in brief in the following slide is the program timeline exercise, which is very important to bring everyone from the various departments who is attending the Pause and Reflect session to show them the journey that the program has moved on. And in some programs, and in some countries, this has also been used at the country organizational level. And also the other core tool that is in this toolkit is the strength, opportunities, aspiration, and the results template, which is more similar to the SWOT analysis, but we chose this because this template is forward-looking, because it looks at aspirations and results, whereas the SWOT analysis looks more at the past. Once we have done that, the facilitator will lead you into the SWOT discussion, and soon after that, when you surface the results from your aspirations, you then go on to the next segment, which is the lessons learned template or the subsection, where you detail what is it that is at program level or a thematic level, what is it that is going on well, where are the opportunities also for improvement on your programs, and then you evaluate your workshop. One important piece that I found useful in this toolkit is the follow-through. Majority of programs fail to have a follow-through session where you need to action plan and also document and learn. Next slide, Jenny. I'm going then to give you details of the other tools that I mentioned. In this subsection, I'm going to give you more detail around the program timeline, which usually is done at the early stages of your implementation or conducting of the session. This timeline is basically meant for you to identify the milestones or successes, and also the external and internal factors that are determining the various milestones. For various programs, they also use that to also surface the key challenges on different timelines. I'm going to show you in the next slide a visual presentation of the program timeline, which helps you to visualize this in a plenary session. Yes, great. So this is an example of a program timeline, which is divided into different periods. Here we looked at Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, but you are free to adapt it to your different time periods. You can put it yearly or even biannually. And also you can have the sticky notes or those A4 slides that are then designed in different colors. They are color coded differently so that you can visually see your program timeline. For example, in this example, the yellow are the key achievements and the milestones. What are the key achievements for each quarter? And the blue ones are the internal events which affected the different milestones or the different program activities. The green ones, those are like the maybe community changes that have affected your program. And this, once you build this in a visual picture, becomes also very important. And other programs have built this in a very interactive infographic, which is then used by management or even used by in the donor meetings. And you can continue building this on as your program continues. This is one of important tool that is available in the toolkit. Next slide, Jenny. Right. The other cornerstone tool that is there is the strength, opportunities, aspirations, and results, which we shorten to say the SOAR framework. This framework basically, the strength is looking at is what is working well, is at organizational level, or if you are doing that at program level, you look at what is working well at the program level. The opportunities, you are looking at areas of improvement. What can we improve? What can we do differently for the program success? After surfacing the opportunities, the next segment will be the aspirations. These are the visions. What does this program or a team want to be? Then once you have finished that, you move on to the results now. What is it that needs to be seen or experienced? And once you have done this, PIVA will also give you a live example from Indonesia. This will help you even then move on to the next stage, which will be the lessons learned and the other next stage. But we'll move on to the methodology of implementing the SOAR framework in the next slide. Yes, so This also gives you the facilitator's guide of how you facilitate the SOT discussion, where in the first step you have a preset probing questions that are related to your program scope, work plan, budget, and any other relevant pieces that you have surfaced as a team. Once you have these probing questions, the next step is then to go into groups where each group will then surface the strength and identify the sources of the evidence or the sources of the strength, because we want this to be evidence-based. Usually we recommend not more than 3 strengths, not more than 5 strengths here. Even if the group identifies many strengths, usually it's a good idea to cluster them, see the emerging themes, then you can then transfer them on your flip charts, and the note takers will be taking these. And once you move from that, you identify again the opportunities, which are the areas of improvement for your program or your thematic area. Identify the sources of evidence. This can be quarterly report or anything, community consultations. Once you have done,
Okay.
once you have done that, you then you move.
That they even say today said that they were hoping to get money.
Sorry, there's an echo. Okay, thank you for that. Once you have done identified the opportunities and the sources of evidence, you move on to the next segment, which is the aspiration now, which you then write down the aspirations, share and agree, discuss, brainstorm as a group. And once you have this, the last section will be the result. For each aspiration, you then identify if this aspiration is met, what would the result look like? And the beauty and the very good about this toolkit, it gives you like the step-to-step facilitation guide, and even the minimum time that you need to spend on each, and also even the materials that you need to put together to prepare for this. This is very important, but you feel free to adapt it to your different contexts. Next slide, Jenny. So yes, before I go to the action planning, one of the other key resources that is in the toolkit, which then is sequenced from the SOAR framework, is the lessons learned document. Here you are now, from whatever you have done from the strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results, this then naturally led into some key lessons learned, where you are now looking at what actually wanted to happen. These are like your hypotheses, what went well, what are the areas for improvement, and you can document this as the lessons learned. And there is also a very interactive lessons learned template, which you can modify and edit and use. Once you have your lessons learned document that is backed by evidence, the next stage is also then to move to action planning, which is a tool that is also found in the third phase of this toolkit, which is the follow-through. So the action planning is here, you are identifying the key actions that need to be done, the timelines, when this needs to be done. The key decision points are very important because they determine the program outcomes and the success of your programming. You then even adapt some of these, for example, the resources required, the support that is needed for you. Even other programs have adapted these to include, for example, the support needed maybe from procurement, for finance, so that you achieve the actions that you need to do. And for example, for the Zimbabwe Elevate program that I also supported to do an action planning following the lessons learned documentation. This is very important because it then was used for developing a program acceleration plan from the action plan, which was then used for accountability to senior management and also to the donors. And this becomes something that you can track your program teams to follow through. And even in your quarterly, monthly, annual reporting, you can also surface some of these action points into your donor reporting. So it's a very important component, which I've seen most programs they miss, but it's very crucial for the success of the program. So next slide, Jenny. So in the next this slide, we are just re-emphasizing that one of the very informative piece of this toolkit, it gives facilitators guide, be it internal, external facilitators, or even the co-facilitators. How do you prepare this Pause and Reflect Toolkit? How do you implement it? Even the sitting arrangement of the session for it to be interactive and informative. And how do you implement it? How do you probe good questions that will lend you to have the right evidence for you to answer the learning priority questions? And also, how do you present? And even after the workshop, how do you follow through and see that all the evaluations and the other action points are taken through by management and the program teams? So this is one piece that is also important, which is missing in other toolkits that I've worked with in the past. So feel free to use these, and if there are any questions, you'll be reaching out to the ideal team for additional mentorship. Let's move to the next slide, Jenny. So in the next slide, Jenny will come in to moderate the Indonesia experience to see how they piloted the exercise. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Conrad, for introducing the toolkit to us. So now we're going to move over to talk with Piva and learn a little bit how she applied the toolkit to organize a pause and reflect session in Indonesia, and then how that session may have helped to inform decision-making for the Managing Risk Through Economic Development activity. So Piva, actually, I think it would be really nice if you could set the context for us and maybe briefly describe the program, where you were working, and why you decided to do a pause and reflect session.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, can you hear my voice? Yeah. Okay, this Managing Risk Through Economic Development Program, or MRED program, it's a regional program that implemented in Indonesia, Nepal, and East Timor. This is a disaster risk reduction program, and Indonesia, the program located in Sigi District, Central Sulawesi Province, Indonesia. You can see the star, little red star is the locations of this program. Yeah, by the time the Pause and Reflect workshop was conducted, this program was at the end of the phase 1. The phase 1 period was by 2020 to February 2022. And this program was planning to continue to phase 2. And the program needs key learning to improve and strengthen the phase 2 implementation by March 2022 up to 2024. The target participants of this program have high risk of flash flood and landslide. And the program interventions are formations or reactivations of the disaster preparedness group. It's build targeted communities' capacities on disaster risk management. It's conduct participatory disaster risk assessment, develop an action plan that involves the village government and communities. It's also implement the action plan, such as conduct mitigation activities, establish the early warning systems, conduct community disaster preparedness simulation, etc. Yeah. This is an emergency program, and it's frequent learning to adapt the program. And the program managers realize about the needs to have good program learning. And when we introduced this tool, the Pause and Reflect tool, to her, she's interested. Yeah, so there is a leadership buy-in, yeah, where the program manager support and allocate budget for these activities. Over to you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up, the buy-in of the leadership. So I'm kind of wondering from your experience with the Pause and Reflect, what are some of those other or some of those top necessary conditions for successfully conducting a Pause and Reflect session?
Yeah, so there are three actually, yeah. The first one is the program awareness on the need for learning to improve or strengthen their implementations. Yeah, and the second is the strong support from program manager or the leadership buy-in. Yeah, as well as the MEL team support, the monitoring, evaluation, learning team support. And the program managers enable the team members to allocate their time for these pause and reflect activities and encourage active participation from the team members. Yeah, and then the third is a well preparation for the event. Yeah, there was a good planning of the facilitations and articulation of learning priorities from the learning questions matrix, which helped to put together the evidence. Yeah, the learning question matrix section in Pause and Reflect Toolkits have numbers of key questions that helps the team members to realize what are the possible learning that are important for them. Yeah.
So I'm wondering too, just as a follow-up around the evidence, was it difficult to put together the evidence? Like how was that process for you in terms of organizing the evidence to sort through in the Pause and Reflect session?
Yeah, there was a challenge on the data or evidence, yeah, for the programs, yeah, where in the program, there were still data that were not finished with the filing, yeah, they're not finished with filing yet. So those data were still in program teams' individual laptops, yeah. And way to overcome it, first is actually to look for the evidence by questions. Yeah, there is a part in the Pause and Reflect toolkits where it gives informations on data that needed by each learning questions. And this is helpful for the team so they can look for the data as they know which data needed. So they don't just go everywhere, but they like focus to get the certain data, yeah. And besides, the strong support from the leadership, the program manager was really effective to help overcome this challenge as the program managers direct the team members to be committed in compiling the data evidence needed.
Wonderful. It sounds like that support's really important. And also, I think it's really interesting how you were able to prioritize using the questions, the kind of data you actually needed. So something else I was curious about is how did you decide who should come to the session and then what they should actually be discussing during the session?
Yeah, okay. This will be a quite bit longer answer, yeah. The process that we had was first, we had meeting with the program managers. We introduced the learning question matrix and asked the program manager to select or prioritize the team for reflection. And for the Emirate program, the program manager chose management, operation and finance, and partner. Yeah, we discussed with the program manager on her recommendation on key question for each teams, and we guide the program manager throughout this team selection process. Yeah, as well as the introduction of the key questions. Yeah. Then we select who are the team members that related to each team's key questions. Yeah, who need to participate in the discussion, and then we group them. Yeah, we also discuss who will be the lead facilitator and who will take part as co-facilitator. Yeah, to lead the group discussion of each team during the workshop. Yeah, at that time, I was selected as the lead facilitators and the Emirate MEL team and the knowledge management officer become the co-facilitators. Then the program manager informed the team members on their tasks related to this pause and reflex. Yeah, the lead facilitator, then contacted the key team members for each teams as well as the co-facilitators and arranged the group discussions. Yeah, we look at the learning question matrix and then we discuss which key question that will be used for the Pause and Reflect workshop. We listen to their opinion and reason why they select certain question and why it is important for the reflection. We guide them to select and prioritize the key questions. Then we ask them to provide evidence or data related to that topic for the workshop. And again, in that Pause and Reflect toolkit, we use the look for evidence by question section to help the team members know which data needed. Yeah, and then we use the facilitator guide in Pause and Reflect toolkit to discuss with the program managers, yeah, on workshop preparations, including budget, venue, seating arrangement, space needed for group activities where the wall should wide enough to put the flip chart papers and timeline discussion. Yeah, then the last is the co-facilitators practice the group facilitation a day before workshop. Yeah.
Great, thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to kind of switch a little bit from like the preparations of the workshop to thinking about what comes after the workshop. So I'm wondering if you can kind of describe how the program was adapted following the Pause and Reflect workshop. So you've done the workshop, and how did you adapt your program? You know, what was identified during the Pause and Reflect, and how was it actually executed?
Okay. As the result of the Pause and Reflect workshop, specifically on this SOAR, the strength, opportunities, aspiration, and result reflection, the program identified that there are challenges with early warning system when there is no electricity. As an adaptive management, the program rolled out battery up systems to ensure the early warning system are working even if there is no electricity. Yeah, in addition, the handy talkie, the number of handy talkie is added. Yeah, they have more right now. And the participants or the beneficiaries, yeah, are encouraged to protect and maintain the equipment for sustainable use. Yeah. And in addition, the program also right now in discussion with the government, the Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysical Agency, or BMKG, to have access to use the radar data to support the weather forecast. The radar data give informations regarding weather forecasts, climate, air quality, and earthquake that occur in various regions. Yeah.
So I'm curious, so you've put these into practice. Have you seen any results from that yet, or is it too soon to see the results from the adaptations you've made in the program?
Yeah, so this is like the one that I just told you is one of the result, yeah, from the adaptation of program. There are still some result, but I think it's still ongoing, yeah, because the program just started. Now they almost complete the first year of the program, and in the future we hope to see more of the result. I mean the adaptations in the program.
Great.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that you faced in planning and conducting the Pause and Reflect session, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, the first challenge is I actually already mentioned previously. It's some team members, yeah, overwhelmed with the data. So the way we overcome it by we look for the evidence by questions. Yeah. And the second is the introvert and the assistants. They were hesitant, yeah, to share their opinion. The coordinators tend to offer power or control their learning discussion, the overdominance. Yeah. So the facilitator, yeah, we should step in and help balance the discussion by encouraging others to speak. And then the third is when a sensitive topic emerged, the argument was heated, and the facilitator should step in and facilitate to cool down the argument and direct the discussion toward positive points of view for improvement or opportunities. Yeah, so we should manage the sensitive topic diplomatically and avoid blame shifting or attaching personality. Yeah.
Can you share, or are you able to share any of those facilitation techniques that you might have used to help pull out some of the voices that were maybe a little quieter, or to diffuse any of the conflict in the room during the Pause and Reflect?
Okay. Yeah. So for the overdominance, yeah. In the beginning of discussions, the facilitators, we promote the cultures of openness and active participation for all the team members. Yeah, and yeah, we keep talking about it over and over, and then we ask all participants to write their opinion or idea in every discussion, yeah, in a paper, and submit it to facilitators. And facilitator help to put it on the wall and group them. Yeah, by doing this, we allow all voices to be heard. Yeah, and then for managing the sensitive topics, first we the facilitators, we were like listen and not interrupt. And then we select the word carefully so it's not adding fuel to the fire. Yeah. And then we direct the participant to dig into the root cause of the problem without attaching personality. And then we lead the conversation or discussion to the ideas of the possible solution. We let the participants share their ideas on possible solution. So we change the weakness that caused the problem into opportunity to develop or improve. Yeah.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has a question for Piva, and if you would be interested in raising your hand and asking that question, just in terms of the practical application of this in Indonesia itself, because she has a lot of experience. One question I do see, and we can maybe start off with that. What were high-level outcomes of your pause and reflect session? Like, what would you consider some of the high-level outcomes of the session itself?
Yeah, the high-level outcomes, one of it is like we got learning related to the advocacy to the local government. Yeah. Because when we're doing a disaster risk management program, it's not just with the communities, but also it should have the support from the local government. Yeah, we have kind of quite weak lower local government support because of their capacity that still need to improve. Yeah, so through this pause and reflect, we got more learning on how to better engage them and collaborate with them, so then they can support us. Yeah, and then the other one is related to how we engage wider communities. Yeah, so then more communities are informed about how to do the disaster risk management for their community. Yeah.
I'm also wondering, just in terms of team dynamics and the session itself, I'm wondering what your impression of, was it helpful to did it help to break down maybe silos in your activity? Did you feel like there was any kind of a team building aspect of bringing people together for the pause and reflect? Are there any kind of sort of operational benefits that you saw from the pause and reflect?
Actually, during the pause and reflect session, I saw the team building is happening. Yeah, because they are group. I mean, like they're like different group for the management's group, the operation and finance, and also partners. Yeah.
Yeah.
This group, when they are reflecting, first they're reflecting about their, just about them and their issue. But later on, when we do the learning, when we start doing the learning, we have to combine how we have to be able to see the connections of different departments, how it's like affecting each other. And we together should, this is like the tools that look for the good solution, look at the bright side. Yeah, we try to find the opportunities. Yeah, means like we're not like blaming people on their weakness, no, but we try to bring everybody to the positive side, so to think together in a positive ways on the solution. When we're doing that during the workshop, it brings people together. Yeah, and when we keep promoting people to speak up, yeah, and we facilitate through the card where they have to write their opinion. Yeah, when we do that, everyone feel like they are heard. Yeah, so then there are more active participation, and I can see that they're like getting well together. Yeah.
Interesting. So another question that came up that I saw that came through from an audience member, and I'm going to ask it now because I think that you've just sort of brought up some of that in terms of like the positivity of the SOAR framework. One of the questions was, how is the SOAR framework different from a SWOT analysis? Is that something that you're able to answer?
Yeah, I'll try to answer, and then if Mary or Conrad want to add, please. Yeah. So what I see and I like about the SOAR framework, yeah, it's not only talking about the past, but it's also talking about the future and bring up the aspirations of the team members together, like collect aspirations and then the result that we want to see. So we look at the future, we build the future together through this using this SOAR framework. Yeah, please, Mary or Conrad, if you want to add more.
Thanks, Piva. I can quickly add maybe the aspiration piece is actually very important because it's helping to bring that collective identity of the team and then create that collective sense. We went through this together, so we own everything. Even if a challenge happened in the finance team, it brings that collective understanding that the impact is on the program. So everybody owns a piece of that. And then that togetherness actually makes it much easier to think of the future and think of the results and think of the sector in general. And I think in terms of aspirations also, the toolkit challenges to think a little bit outside the narrow framework and think of your program as one piece of the bigger puzzle. And I think that opens up a bit more to think outside that narrow framework and not look at challenges as difficulties that you have to deal with, but at opportunities that help you build up and strengthen the program. Thank you, Piva. Over.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we are going to move into the Q&A portion of this session. And there's already a good amount of questions that have been asked. And please feel free, if you have any other lingering questions, to throw them in there. And then we are going to also invite Conrad and Mary to join us here so that there's a full panel to answer questions. There they are. I see Conrad and Mary. So we have Piva, Conrad, and Mary here with us to answer all of your questions about the Pause and Reflect Toolkit, or just about some of the tools or Pause and Reflect in general. There's so many questions here. So what makes this toolkit specifically useful for emergency food security programs, and could it be used in any program in any sector? I think that's a good question. Conrad?
Yes, thank you for that question. So yes, the food for thought toolkit was developed with because the food security programs are in emergency and uncertainty. But what we have done is all the resources that are there are versatile, they are adaptable, and they are used in various emergency programs or development programs, and even at organizational level. I'll give you a short story. We are conducting at our department a retreat in the next coming months. So I'm using this Pause and Reflect Toolkit at our organizational level to even drive the SOAR framework, the lessons learned, and the action planning, regardless of what the resources are coined on the Food for Thought Toolkit. So Mary, you can come through also and add.
Thanks, Conrad. So one of the tools in the toolkit is the question matrix. If you download that, and let's say you've never conducted a pause and reflection, and here you are tasked to conduct one for a food security program, it will give you examples of questions that you can think about. And they're also probing questions and sub-questions. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's manageable and it's diverse enough for being relevant for different programs. So we offered those questions, and they're specific to food security programs. So it will ask about specific outcomes, about specific interventions, just so that you can start thinking about framing the discussion. But other than that, the rest of the tools are pretty content neutral and can be applied everywhere. And for example, one of our consortium programs piloted the planning component when it was ready, and it applied even at the consortium level. So we stretched and piloted and tested it in various contexts just to make sure that it's flexible enough. But yeah, I would say it could be used for any program. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Conrad and Mary. Another question I see here, and actually I'm going to combine it with a question that I have. How long does such an activity take, and who is the owner of actions agreed? So the first part of that question, how long does this activity take? And I want to add another question on there. How can it be shorter? Like what, how can it be adapted so that maybe if you don't have time for a full day or 2 days of reflection, is it possible to do that adaptation?
Yes, indeed. Even for a 2-hour or a 1-hour session, you can use some of the mechanisms or even the resources for pausing and reflecting, even in your smaller teams. You can bring these. How do you identify the strengths, opportunities, weakness, the new action plan? What is it that you have learned? New action plan, even within 30 minutes, as you discuss with your subordinates or your superiors. So this is very versatile. You can adopt it across different levels and across different maybe time frames or even durations. Over to Jenny. And
Thanks, Conrad. Does anybody want to add anything to that? And then who is the action, who is the owner of the actions taken? If you decide on some actions, who owns that? Who follows up on that?
Great. In the template, you find that you adapt it to say this is the action, who is responsible, the support needed. So the responsible, the focal person is the one who is going to follow through that action, and with the defined due date. Usually, let's say it's a nutrition component, maybe you assign it to the nutrition lead, but the overall person who will be in charge of that will also be overseeing that. Let's say in some programs, they have got the male director and the program managers. In some programs, they also have maybe the strategic learning leads or someone who is charged with the learning, who is the one who will be overseeing that. But the different items, the action points, they are assigned to different people in the program. Over to Mary and Piva.
Thanks, Conrad. I want to just provide a bit more to the answer. So in the toolkit, we recommend that the first time, if you're doing it the first time, take at least a day. At the MREG, we decided to take a day and a half because it was the first time we were all kind of engaging with the tool, and we wanted a bit of the evening time to adapt and make corrections if we needed to. But I think we realized that to actually have an in-depth conversation, especially for a team that has not done a pause and reflection, is going to take time. And Piva maybe can speak about the amount of time we needed for warming up people and the other, other soft parts of until you get to pausing and reflecting. That's absolutely necessary. There are a couple of activities which you can eliminate if you repeat the pause and reflect quarterly. And at Mercy Corps, by our policy, we require pause and reflections for programs on quarterly basis. So the timeline exercise, you don't need to do the whole timeline of the whole program every quarter. You can just focus maybe on that quarter. Lessons learned might not be as elaborate. So it allows you to cut and shorten. And the other piece that is in the toolkit is actually an alternative agenda for hybrid facilitation. So assuming you have half of the team face-to-face, and then there are some people joining online. So how do you combine that? And obviously the length is impacted by that. And then if you're going to conduct that fully virtually, again, you can't have people sitting for 8 hours in front of a computer. So we then condense that content into 3 to 4 hour slots. But yeah, it's pretty flexible. There are a few agenda options in the toolkit. But I'd like to ask Piva, like from your experience, I know that we debated back and forth, should we allow that time? And then you were pushing hard to have that warm up phase because it was important. But yeah, if you want to add, over to you.
Yeah, just a little bit addition, yeah. So what might affect how long the duration is actually how many key questions you want to ask. The more key questions you want to ask, it will take longer. So it's better like prioritize. Yeah. And with the team, yes, in the beginning, we have to have some icebreaker first. Yeah. Because sometimes the teams, there's like a team dynamics that we need to kind of clear out first. Yeah. Make peace for everyone to sit together. Yeah. So there's like, we get like an hour. And then during the workshop, we had sometimes to stop and do some energizer. Yeah, that's really helpful to like bring people together and relax. Yeah. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Piva. Actually, you can stay unmuted because I actually have a question for you that I wanted to ask. So I'm wondering how you managed expectations, especially that the PNR happens at the end of the program. And some staff are about to leave or depart. And how do you sustain the motivation to still think about the program and its results if people are leaving the program and won't necessarily be there to see the fruition?
Yeah, this is not easy, to manage the expectations. What we can let them know from the beginning of this Pause and Reflect is like all the learning coming through Pause and Reflect. We'll try our best to follow up. We did the action plan in the end, and this action plan actually it's really put out. So the whole phase 2 of MRED, we opened that the key activities that we're going to make, and we'll kind of plan which one of the key learning that we already get from this workshop will be, or we try to implement or adapt the program with it. We put it along the way during the phase 2 program timeline. So that's why the program timeline and action plan is very important. Yeah. So even though they won't be participate again in the MRED second, but at least they already know where the change is expected to happen coming from this Pause and Reflect. Yeah. Back to you, Jenny.
Great, thanks. One of the other questions that I've seen from the audience is for the pause and reflection done at the end of an activity, how and where will learning be applied? So I'm not sure who is best placed to answer. Probably all of you are actually. Go ahead, Conrad.
Good, thank you for that question, Jenny, and the audience. So yeah, very important question. I'll give you an example of when I'm rolling the Pause and Reflect session with the Nigeria team. They are doing a lessons learned for at the end of the one DHA funded program, and we are then drawing these lessons learned. We are using tools from the Pause and Reflect session, and we are using these learnings to inform the next programming, the follow-on programming. So there are various mechanisms of how you apply lessons learned from this Pause and Reflect session to the next programming, and also to yours. You can then even package it to some learning briefs, which you can use in various platforms to share with your management, donors, and the external audience. So this is one example that we have used for that program. Over to Piva and Mary for additions.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit addition from my side. Yeah, for the program, yeah, if they still have the phase 2 or the second phase of the or the another phase of the program, they can apply during that time. But even if it's not, yeah, if it's implemented by the end of the program, it's still very beneficial for the management team. Yeah, and we can use the learning for other program that kind of similar with this program. Yeah, and we've been using that in Indonesia actually for planning another program.
I can come through again before Mary. One of the key components for the CLA framework is institutional memory. Even if the program is coming to an end, we need to document that and have an institutional repository of what happened in the prior program. It can be used even in the next 2 years or in the next 10 years. I have seen programs that have benefited from such an institutional memory. Over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Conrad and Piva. I think you guys covered both, like learning that every individual at the Pause and Reflect is learning, and then the program collectively is learning. And then if the organization has good knowledge management and learning mechanism, then the organization is learning. And we're here today to really launch the toolkit with you so that the sector can learn. And I think that's one of the bigger dreams of this toolkit that we intend to actually follow through and hopefully stay in touch with you even as you start using it. One of the, actually at the MRED program manager, you know, the way she would motivate the departing staff, one of the things that she said kind of stuck with me is that you're leaving the program, but you're staying in the sector. So whatever you learn today, it's kind of going back and going to affect your work in the future. So we're here for the sector and as humanitarians. And I think that's kind of the intent we took as we wrote the toolkit. So it doesn't really locate the learning where it happens, but it does say that you have to articulate some lessons. It has to be it has to be a thing that you walk away with remembering and you know you need to action against or you need to improve against. And that can be big for the program agency or the sector itself. So I'm hoping that this can open that forum for us to take that forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And actually I have a follow-up question to that, and it kind of goes to that question there, is there a final report written after this activity? So you do this activity, you have some learning that happens during that activity, and there's, you know, kind of this knowledge that's created. So how do you get that knowledge into some kind of a form that can be, you know, explicit or can be found, or, you know, do you have suggestions for that knowledge management piece?
Yeah, in the toolkit, there is actually a tool that helps articulate lessons. So remember like how we discussed strengths, opportunities for improvements and aspirations and results. And then there's an activity where you put all of that on a floor or on a wall and start connecting the dots together and looking at that comprehensively articulate. So what did I learn? What happens next with this? And you write that up. There is a template that helps guide like very succinct and targeting writing. And that's another skill we learned through the pilot that not everybody has. So it needs some collective bringing together. Once it's documented, and that's one of the weaknesses, I think, of our sector, of the lack of documentation of the lessons in a way that they're actionable and can be learned. So I'm hoping that that tool actually helps to address that gap. It becomes available for circulation and discussion. We have a global community of practice, which Conrad is the chair of. So we bring the community constantly together to explore the tools that we use for documenting and sharing learning. And then we have regional communities of practice internally that then dig into the content of the lesson in a particular sector, for example. So you have, the toolkit itself isn't going to do the magic. There have to be some mechanisms that really drive that magic to happen. And communities of practice, learning events, conferences, these are very effective mechanisms. And then of course, at the proposal writing stage, that's where we start pulling those together and looking at what did we learn and what are we going to improve in this new proposal. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Mary. Any additions from Conrad or Piva before I move on?
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for that. So I'll give you a practical example for the upcoming Pause and Reflect session that we are going to do. We are going even to the team report out, write a brief report soon after the Pause and Reflect session. But what is important is also think through and develop an outline for the report prior to that. And also when you link that to your communication strategy, usually for at organizational level, I've seen programs that then bring out the key storylines from the Pause and Reflect session, then they share it with management or even at their website. What are the key takeaways from this? So there are various mechanisms where you document and even communicate internally through your different workplaces, your Facebook, the key takeaways to bring to speed those people who didn't attend the Pause and Reflect session, so that they kind of some feedback mechanisms and the feedback loops. Over to you, Jenny.
Great, thanks, Conrad. Piva, this question is for you. How did you design the MRED program learning questions?
Yeah. So for the learning questions, actually I was explaining on it during the first the previous questions. Yes. So first, it's the program manager should select the theme. Yeah, the theme which one she thinks is important, and we should guide, because sometimes they just want everything. They think everything is important. Yeah. So then we have to guide, because there's limitation of time also. Yeah, so they have to consider on that. So they have to select the priority, their priorities theme, and afterwards, if you go to the learning question matrix, there's already like the key learning question for each teams. Yeah, and she could like take some recommendations. Yeah, the recommendations questions, and then when we already have the group of people that are related to each team that already selected, yeah, they come together and reflect from the recommendation from the program manager versus their opinion and their experience. Yeah, and they will again look at that and select. They can select the key question as well as the sub key questions that help triggering the next conversations. Yeah, so they select, and we as the facilitator guide them again to prioritize, because during the MRET, yeah, I can see that the team, they want everything again, like, oh, this is important, and this kind of, they realize, yeah, some of the question is really good because it's helped the team to realize that apparently that part is important, and then they kind of reflect even already during the selecting the question. They already start reflecting which one that actually key important learning, yeah, for them. But we again help them to prioritize again, select, because again it will affect the durations of the activities. Yeah, okay, then we pick a few. Yeah, so that's how we pick. We pick before the workshop is starting. Yeah, so if we want to have this workshop, we have to allocate more time for this. We have to consider that the team in the field, they have already an activities, they're really busy, and they need to allocate time for this and do some reflection. So yeah, it will take some times, yeah, for that. Back to you, Jenny.
I have a follow-up question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but I'm going to give it a go. Are there factors that you or the leadership used to actually guide people in prioritizing questions? Like what made a question a priority in your program?
So actually, it's become priority when there is an issue. Yeah, an issue in that themes, the issue that everyone's already aware. Yeah, sometimes people talk about it, and sometimes they didn't talk about it, only just like some group of people or the management just talk about it. It's kind of drive the program manager and also the team members to go to that directions. Yeah, so actually when selecting, there's already starting this reflection, yeah, and they reflect just also based on their program experience, the implementation process itself, and yeah, that's actually how it's happened.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I don't know if you can answer. I don't know if you guys use a TOC. Were you able to review your do you guys use TOCs? Yes. Were you able to review your TOC?
So the TOC was reflected during the preparation, but more on the management team. Yeah. So in the management team, when they are discussing on the key points, one of it was their look at the TOLA. Yeah, in TOLA we have all, it's like our tracking system for the indicators. It have of the TOC and the program logic, and also the indicators track. So they use that. Yeah, so they back and forth for the management's group. It's like it's discussed. Yeah.
Are there any high level findings to share? Was the TOC changed or adapted in any way after this pause and reflect?
Yeah, so the TOC not really changed, but it's just coming to make the team realize that in order to make a change, just like in this TOC, it needs longer duration for the programs. Yeah, it's kind of more understanding on the duration to get the change made. Yeah.
Maybe Piva, if I can add, the TOC itself did not change, but a lot of the mechanisms of implementation got adapted. So one was like the partnership and localization approach. was expanded. The lens was maximally expanded. So more of the activities were carved out to the partners to increase the effectiveness on the ground, which was a discussion that was had as we were looking at the outcomes achieved for the program. Another one, Piva, I remember, was about operations support, more finance operations support and integration of that in the overall management meetings, and looking at the operational progress as we're looking at the program progress. So there was a lot of the functions that that were changed to make the TOC happen. And I clearly remember, as Piva mentioned, that time being more realistic about how long it takes if you're going to also localize and implement through partners, and stretching that work plan a little bit more. Over.
Great, thanks. So are Pause Reflect sessions done for the whole program, or can we just focus on one specific component or activity?
I'm loving that question. The Pause and Reflect session is very versatile. That can be done at a country level, at organizational level, at program level, and even at thematic level, or even the resources that are there. They can, even if you do one-to-one meetings with your subordinates or a manager, you can use some of the conceptual thinking around that. I'll give you an example, like Mercy Corps. Now we are doing our country strategies during this period, and some of the resources that we are pushing teams to look through are some of these facilitation techniques, which are contained in the Pause Reflect Toolkit. So yes, you can do that at your program level, or even at a specific thematic nutrition, disaster risk thematic area, over to the other team members.
Thanks, Conrad. This is an interesting question. What has been your experience with cross-sharing and grouping Pause and Reflect findings across programs and countries so far?
I can come on that, and then happy to. So we're just starting. I don't think we have a lot of experience with this. I mean, bear in mind the toolkit was piloted last year, so we've been kind of working with a couple of programs. We're seeing a lot of aha moments for similar findings and similar challenges and similar successes, and it's interesting because just having that evidence really. You know, we were able to raise other questions, like, are we limiting ourselves because we see a lot of similarities? Let's focus on how these are different, what makes them different, are the differences enhancing program outcomes? So it allows us to expand that lens. What some of our programs found interesting is layering the pause and reflection findings on evaluation findings. And there's only 2 of them that have recently done, and it seems to have helped just to kind of consolidate that, hey, we made this change, and then at the end, the evaluation actually recognized that there was a change after a certain event, and they were able to track it back to pause and reflection. So I don't think we have extensive learning at this point, but the couple of that we have done has proven to be very effective.
Yeah, that's fantastic results. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, like what Mary said, it's too early, but what we have seen also from the SOAR framework from different countries that have implemented that, I think one of the similarities is answering the how part. In terms the what part is we already know, like nutrition, what, but how are we going to implement the implementation modalities and the adaptation piece? So they are crystallizing around answering the how part. How are we going to implement this intervention? Over.
Yeah, I would like to add, yeah, if it's in Indonesia, we share it with other programs. Yeah, so currently the other programs still learning on how to do it again, because they, when we have it for the first time, it's like quite big, yeah. So everyone think, wow, this is really, it's something that if we want to do this, it's like quite huge activities, and we want to have like something that also as much as this program. So then the program still like consider this, and like just Mary said, yeah. So they still like trying to figure out how to fit it with the programs. And like the next thing that we have to do in Indonesia is like help them to guide, on how to implement it in a more smaller scope, and in more regular basis. In Indonesia, per 6 months we have like a program filing month, but it's also have the other part like the data quality assessment, doing that, and also if there is another approach or learning was shared during that time. And this is like the time where we are kind of promoting these tools with other programs, and we hope there will be more programs adopt this for their continuous learning process.
Wonderful, thanks. I have a couple other questions that are pretty easy to answer, and then we'll move on to wrapping up the webinar. So do you see a need for an external facilitator consultant for this activity?
Yes, depending on the program complexity and also even the numbers of people who are participating in that, your budget constraints and everything. Because once it becomes a huge program or a huge session, you also need the other internal colleagues to also participate and gain from the workshop. I know for Mercy Corps, we are going to have our senior leadership meeting in Nairobi. Some of the techniques that they are going to use are following the Pause Reflect mechanism, but there are already external facilitators that will also help drive that. Equally for our PAC retreat, program retreat in Netherlands, I'm going to be co-facilitating that with another external facilitator that will bring in the dynamism that we want. Over to Mary and Piva.
Thanks, Conrad. So one of the things in this toolkit that you'll notice when you start working through it is that in general, as we were doing our context scanning, a lot of the perception was that everybody should come to the Pause and Reflect session. Everybody in the program needs to participate. But then when you boil it down to the logistics and how to handle and how to make everyone's participation meaningful, it was becoming almost an impossible task. So what the toolkit recommends is start with the questions, identify the right people with experience that can contribute towards collective learning, and then determine who is the right facilitator. In Mercy Corps, we do use a lot of internal facilitation, internal to the organization, but perhaps a little external to the program. So for example, Piva is from Mercy Corps Indonesia. She may have supported the program, but she's not part of the program team implementing it on a daily basis. So there's some familiarity already with her as she goes into the team, which helps to break the ice, but she's distant enough to maintain her neutrality as she's facilitating through the conversations. So some level of, I think, externality is helpful, but the toolkit recognizes that sometimes it's just not possible. You don't have the resources or the time, or the person's not available, you're managing remotely, so it can be adapted. And there are some helpful tips in the facilitator's guide at the end that helps even inexperienced facilitators to handle facilitation challenges that we spoke about a little bit. So I'd say like it really depends. Either of them can work effectively if you have an experienced facilitator. If not, there are guides, there are tools and tips in the guide to help whoever is assigned to do the task to succeed.
I would like to add, for whoever doing these facilitations, external or internal, it's like they will need to learn about the programs, the program context before the workshop had started. So then when they are in that workshop facilitating, they understand what people are talking about. So if that facilitators already did this homework beforehand, it will be like good facilitations afterwards.
Great, thanks guys. So this last question I think is a really fantastic transition to the closing of this webinar. Is there a soft copy of the toolkit available? And the short answer is yes, there is. It is housed on the FSN network. And I'm going to hand it over to Mary now to talk through a little bit about how they're scaling up the use of this toolkit and some tips and tricks for using the soft copy of the toolkit.
Thanks, Jenny. So the Mercy Corps right now, we've piloted in a few countries, as I mentioned, and engaged them as we were developing the toolkit, and we also engaged in collecting feedback after it was developed. So it's been quite significant engagement from our head office, regional offices, and country offices. But on the slide now, you're seeing the countries that we have lined up who are already in the planning phase, and we're in discussions to have them use the toolkit for their upcoming conclusion of the program and documenting that learning through pause and reflection. As Conrad mentioned, we're trying to use this toolkit also at a team level, especially with our team. It has a dual purpose. Purpose one is that I want to make sure that everybody in our team knows how to use the toolkit and goes through the experience of receiving pause and reflection and having to pause and reflect, but also engaging their interest and encouraging them to be facilitators, become facilitators. We're also stretching the toolkit a little bit and seeing, okay, if you're not in a program framework, can you use some of these tools to actually frame that conversation? Let's say many of us develop strategies. Would this toolkit help to actually bring a team together to reflect on our past journey and identify ways that we're taking it forward? That meeting is happening in 2 weeks' time, but so far through the planning, it has worked for us. We've been able to consolidate our evidence, shape discussion questions, train a couple facilitators who will do small group discussions. We're modifying some methodologies, but in general, it is content neutral, so it can work not only for food security programs, but for other programs. It can work in humanitarian and emergency context, as well as development context. So feel free to expand the use. I think I found it extremely helpful. I want to mention also that we designed the toolkit in an interactive PDF format, partly because we want to make sure that we don't kill more trees by printing it, but also provide a platform that's user-friendly, engaging. You can click around, you can move back and forth very easily. And we realized that, and Jenny, you were one of the people pushing for this, but a lot of the trainers want to have the templates that they can just go in and fill out. So when you download the toolkit, you're going to get 2 folders. One of them is going to be the PDF toolkit, and a separate folder will have all of the Word documents, all of the templates in Word format that you can already easily start using. I have organized a lot of workshops, but Piva and I found like the planning tool extremely helpful. It has details that we would tend to forget, like make sure you have the translation, make sure you are timing this and that. Like it's just like kind of things you forget and have to modify your agenda on the day of with some last minute reminders. So those are tools even for very experienced facilitators that could be helpful. And the Word version you can just start using on the go. The toolkit has been tested against 508 compliance requirements, so it's PDA readable. And thanks to the Ideal, it's been translated into French, so it's available now in 2 languages, and we'll circulate the link in a minute. When you go into the toolkit, there will be a guidance on how to download. So I want to ask you, it's just a brief guidance, please read it. Because it's a PDF toolkit, when you download, you need to create a folder and make sure that when you extract the zipped file, it's extracted in the same folder. So the instruction, just follow the instructions. It's very easy, but a quick trick, because sometimes if we download and extract in different places, PDF might create temporary files and it can mess up the linkages between the documents. So just download everything and extract everything in the same place. And then we realized that you as users are going to have a lot of questions as you dig into it. I want to ask you to please stay in touch with us, send your questions to info@fsnnetwork.org, if I can ask somebody to post that in the chat. On a monthly basis, we will go back and collate the questions and start generating Q&A resources to accompany the toolkit. But we also want to hear from you. What do you feel useful? What needs to be adapted? And we want to make this a useful resource, as I mentioned, for the sector writ large. So we're happy to go back and make adaptations as needed. Yeah, with that, I'll hand over to you, Jenny.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. So a huge thank you to you guys for showing up today and sharing this tool. Also, a huge thank you for developing and piloting the tool, because that was quite an effort. It is full of different tools and resources, all in PDF and Word, as Mary just mentioned, and it can be adapted and used as you see fit. I'd also like to thank the audience for all of the fantastic questions. You guys were very interactive. It was great to hear from everybody out there. And I feel like we got a very broad view of what a Pause and Reflect is, and how we can apply this toolkit in our own programs. Before we close out, I just want to invite you to complete a brief survey to help IDEAL to continue to improve our events. It's only take you 3 minutes to fill out. It's been posted there in the chat, so please, if you could go ahead and follow that link and complete the survey before you leave here today. And then just another plug and a quick plea to go ahead at the end of this and just check out the toolkit and download it today. It's available on the FSN network. The link has been posted in the chat. Start using it. Let us know how you feel, and ask any questions you need, again, at info@fsnnetwork.org. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your night, day, wherever you are. And we will hopefully see you at another IDEAL event soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.